Dhama Jebe No Bar Jebe Ke Tarpa Dham Tham Je Kebe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tham Jege Su Jebe Ma Nang Ka Dang Nyambe Sen Jen Tham Je Dewa Tham Ten Tung Yang Dang Je Nir Tu Lana Me Pa Yang Dabra Zobe Chanju Rinpo Je Dombara Je Dala Tangwa Jepe Da Nobar Jepe Ge Sarva Da Tam Je Gembe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tam Jege Se Jebe Ma Nang Ka Da Nyampe Senchen Tam Je Dewa Dan Den Tumya Dan Je Nurtu Lana Me Pa Ya Dabra Zobe Chanju Rinpo Je Dobra Je Dala Tawa Jebe Da Nobar Jebe Ge Tarba Da Tam Je Kempe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tam Jege Su Jebe Ma Nang Ka Dang Nyampe Senchen Tam Je Dewa Dan Den Tung Dan De Nerdu Lana Me Pa Yang Dabra Zobe Chanju Rinpo Je Dobra Je Le Je De Sama Geki Bardu Lunga Yizum Kewala Ko Mashi Bardu Lunga Yizum Kewala Ko De Terene Suntene Ma Tsan Ta Samji Bardu Lunga Yizum Kewala Ko Chodan Suji Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dhane Kyausu Che Dhage Jinsu Gibe Sanamke Jola Pencher Sanje Dubrashu Sanje Chodan Suji Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dhane Kyausu Che Dhage Jinsu Gibe Sanamke Dola Pencher Sanje Dubrashu Sanje Chodan Suji Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dhane Kyausu Che Dagi Jinsu Gibe Sonange Dola Pencher Sanje Dubrashu Sanje Chodan Suji Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dhane Kyausu Che Dagi Jinsu Gibe Sonange Dola Pencher Sanje Dubrashu Kadang Yampe Sanchen Tongche Dewa Dang Deve Gundan Dambra Gyuchi Dungyao Dang Dungyao Gi Gyudang Dewa Gyuchi Dungyao Mepe Dewa Dang Me Dewa Gyuchi Niring Chadang Nidang Dewa Tanyang La Nabra Gyuchi Kadang Yampe Sanchen Tongche Dewa Dang Deve Gyudan Dambra Gyuchi Dungyao Dang Dungyao Gi Gyudang Dewa Gyuchi Dunga Mepe Dewa Dangme Dewa Gyuchi Nering Chadang Nidang Dewa Tangyang La Nebra Gyuchi Monang Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tamche Dewa Dang Dewa Gyudan Dambra Gyuchi Dunga Dang Dunga Gi Gyudan Dewa Gyuchi Dunga Mepe Dewa Dangme Dewa Gyuchi Nering Chadang Nidang Dewa Tangyang La Nebra Gyuchi. Now, page fifth, well, whatever the page is for you, the seven branch worship in the different languages. In all the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you, lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. By the power of this aspiration to noble deeds, all conquerors appear vividly in my mind, with as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands. I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom of Buddhas, numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you, conquerors, in this way, with infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies. I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors, and praise all of you gone to bliss. With the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps and superior incense I offer to you, conquerors, with excellent garments and best fragrances, and sandalwood powder heap high as Mount Meru. All wondrous offerings perfectly arranged I offer to you, conquerors. These vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you, conquerors, with the power of conviction and noble deeds. I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors all the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance. I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions and the heirs of the Buddhas, solitary realizers, hearers still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings. You who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi. All you who are my protectors, please turn the unexhaled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana. Please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings. Whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. Now it's the mandala offering. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain, far continent, sun and moon. I visualize as a Buddha land and offer it. May all wandering beings experience such a pure land. To the Gurus who possess the three kayas, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and thusness offerings. With my body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence, please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment. Whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate it all to complete Bodhi. Om Guru Deva Dhaki Nirana Mandala Pratitya Swaham. Please turn the wheel of Dharma of the greater, lesser, and common vehicles in accordance with the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings. Durji Chanchen Dele Naroda, Mamita Popa Durji, and Gokadu Sudin Savela Mesha, Sajula Mahitam Chokum, so what the Sodaki Chinji, Domes Amanka, Papetos, and Laka, so make a water Jamba, Jidin Kupashala, to Tadu Sangu Kelame, Jinji, Loshi to Change, and again, doesn't again simply to the change. Jina Jansa, the Magisa Dombola, the Sanjuking, the Mida Majumation Shuta, Kodo Kandu Goro Kiki, said Tad, the Kijin Lachisha, Guru Bema, go down there. The Susan Kunjing over there, and saying Chukung was a don, the Bats of Elame Shala, so. Let's see. So I want to share something with you. Let's see. Second. See if I can share screen. Can you all see this? The shared screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So this is a prayer that was recently composed by His Holiness the Dragon Kyabgun. So a little bit of background. I had several times made a request to His Holiness to compose a type of prayer. It's a genre. It's a genre of supplication or prayer or aspiration for the spread, for the success of the Dharma. Specifically, I said in the West. So, but after asking a few times, finally, His Holiness said, I'm not going to write something like that because people might misunderstand and think that we are trying to convert people. So he said, instead, I'll write something else. So this is what he wrote. I want to ask Jasper or someone to copy the Chinese version and share in the chat, Zoom chat, for people who need the Chinese. The Chinese version is also shared by His Holiness's Facebook page. And so this is a very special prayer, even in terms of this genre of prayer. My translator, when he saw this, he said, "Oh, this is really unique. It's not the usual kind of imagery, the usual expression that you find in these prayers for the benefit of the beings. It's a very fresh, very refreshing imagery. And you can see that basically His Holiness's interest in nature is very much reflected in this prayer. It's concerned for like the environment, and it's also reflected in this prayer. Yes, so the Chinese has been shared. Chat. so briefly to read this. So this is a prayer that you can do, you know. So anyway, I'm going to read. A brilliant red sun blazes in the sky at dawn, while sparkling dewdrops glisten on tips of grass, and crystal clear sounds of animals fill the earth. Oh, what joy! May this world of peace remain forever. Already in this first verse, it's rather unusual in this kind of composition. It's not being translated yet into Spanish, so sorry, Antonio. We can just summarize. So the next three verses, His Holiness is going to refer to the three poisons, which is desire or attachment, and then aversion or hatred, and then ignorance, confusion. This will be mentioned in the next three verses. This captivating forest landscape, lush and green, is like a metropolis of countless creatures. May all beings under the power of desire find peace in the cool breezes of love and kindness. Hmm. The English translator, Law, has kept each line to 12 syllables, by the way. Then the next, like sea creatures in the depths of the ocean's deep, beings in samsara's six realms defy counting. Waves of the ocean of anger surge without relent. May the victors quell this surge with their compassion. In Jambudvipa, the realm of night and darkness, ignorance overpowers all sentient beings. Like light from the radiant white moon in the sky, may the light of the victor's wisdom show us the way. Water depends on earth, while wind depends on space. Everything in this world depends on something else. Let's keep the earth healthy and protect the environment. May the dependent origination of the victors reign supreme. Yeah, so anyway, I thought I'll share that with all of you because obviously I'm very happy that His Holiness has composed this and got it translated into Chinese, into English, then into whatever languages that people need. That will be wonderful. So I'm going to stop sharing. So now we continue with Shantideva, chapter 9, the chapter on wisdom or on understanding. And we have arrived until stanza 34. In our last class, we covered stanza 34. So in stanza 34, which I will read once again, when something and its non-existence both are absent from before the mind, then no other option does the latter have, meaning the mind. No other option does the mind have, but to come to perfect rest, resting in a state that is free from concepts. So what is this something referring to? In particular, this something is whatever it is that is the basis for us to cling onto, to grasp onto, whatever we want to call it, right? Fancier terms, inherent existence. Fancy term, self. Fancy term, Atman. Fancy term, person. Fancy term, phenomena. Basically, whatever has become an object for us to grasp, that is the something. That is the something that is here when it says when something and its non-existence. So when that's something, whatever that is the basis for grasping, and its non-existence, meaning when we can apply the insight, the understanding of emptiness, which is here its non-existence. Okay, so now what is its non-existence? Its non-existence is not talking about that let's say, oh, I have a roll of tape here. So this is something. So let's say now I have grasping in relation to this roll of tape, right? its non-existence is not talking about, oh, actually, this roll of tape is imaginary. Actually, it's not here. You cannot use it to stick things because it's just a figment of your imagination. No, no, no. The non-existence is not talking about that this doesn't, that this is not really held within my fingers. Its non-existence is not talking about, it's not claiming that this is not actually held by my fingers, or that this tape, which you think can be used to stick things, actually cannot do that. It's not talking about that. Its non-existence is talking about something more specific. What the non-existence is referring to is the way we grasp at it, the way we attach to it. That attachment, that grasping, is based on this feeling, this belief, this projection that this tape ultimately exists. And therefore, there is a reason and a purpose to grasp at it. Now, that so-called ultimate existence of this is never there in the first place. It's simply our projection. So when we understand that, that is when we say we see its non-existence. Yeah, uh, so something and its non-existence is not tape and no tape. No, yeah, it's not something and its non-existence. No, it's not talking about that, okay? It's tape and its non-existence, as in the way we think, oh, this is really special, or this is really terrible, or this is, I cannot live without it, or I need to get rid of it. All those projections, when we understand that those projections are unreal. They have no true basis. That is the non-existence. So when we develop enough understanding to see this, to see that something and its non-existence, both are no longer, both of them. So when it is something, it has some basis to kind of, you could say, occupy our attention. And its non-existence is to counteract, right, this wrong view with regards to this. So when the counteracting element has been applied to the wrong view, they dissolve each other, and now they are both absent from the mind. When that happens, then the mind comes to rest. Then, so you can say, right, 34 is talking about when the Dharmakaya nature, the Dharmakaya is achieved, is achieved. But in case you think that is all, 35, 36, 37, quickly, Shantideva reminds us. That's just half of that picture, so to say. The other half of the picture of becoming a Buddha, when the mind has been freed from some things and all things, and the non-existence of all things, when both those have been dispelled, not only has the mind come to rest, as in the mind is liberated from all the entanglements, liberation is achieved, but together with this liberation that is achieved are all the Buddha qualities that manifest to benefit beings. So it's not a static state of nothingness, but rather true and efficient benefit to beings are now naturally unfolding, which is what 35, 36, 37 is talking about. So 35 compares the state of Buddha to the wish-fulfilling jewel and the tree of miracles. And this tree of miracles is referring to this mythology. Like in the God realm, there's this wish-fulfilling tree that whatever you want, you just go to this big magic tree, reach into the leaves, and then pull out whatever you want. So here it said that Buddhas are like this wish-fulfilling jewel or this wish-fulfilling tree. And why? Due to the aspirations they made while they are on the Bodhisattva level. So this is a reminder to us that in order for us to become Buddhas, it is not just about clear understanding. It's not just about the wisdom. It's also the instilling, the creation of these aspiration prayers, these great aspirations to benefit beings. So such as the prayer that I just shared with you, that is an aspiration prayer. May beings be free from suffering. May they be free from anger. May they be free from desire. May they be free from confusion. Those types of wishes, those kind of aspirations is what makes it that at the time when we see through all confusion, cut all entanglements, not only do we achieve peace and liberation, these aspirations that we made while on the path now burst forth, so to say, with spontaneous benefit. At that point, you don't need to think anymore. Oh, I want to help this person. I want to help that person. Oh, maybe I can go over there and help that person. It's spontaneous. The last two lines of 37, although bodhisattvas has passed, although bodhisattvas pass beyond all grief at the point of Buddha, that they have transcended, they have passed beyond all grief, all suffering. Nonetheless, they can continue to satisfy the suffering of beings. So this point here, I think, calls attention to how, at least, based on the way we kind of empathize with others, right? So right now, we can only empathize with someone, we can only have compassion for someone, we can only help someone when we in some way share the distress, right? The distress that someone that we observe. That's how you empathize, right? You share in the distress, or you share in the grief to even some little degree, right? That makes you connect with the other person and recognize that the other person is suffering. But here is something that is not so easy to understand. Nonetheless, Shantideva reminds us, Buddhas are completely beyond grief. So a legitimate question that we might ask is, well, if they're completely beyond grief, that means they don't have any capacity to even, right? Based on our logical way of thinking, they have no basis anymore to even recognize that someone is suffering. So then how can they really benefit others? Here the answer is, they can benefit others because at the point of Buddha, they don't need to make like specific effort to benefit others. Because at the point of Buddha, all the aspirations that were made on the path to the state of Buddha, all that kicks into action. Stanza 38, Shantideva raises a point. And frankly, I think this point, 38 and 39, is a little out of place, I think. Who knows what's going on, you know? Because he raises an objection. The objection is like, how can offerings, you know, that are made to beings who no longer have any intention to benefit beings, because from 35, 36, 37, we said that, you know, once you're Buddhas, right, you don't even need to see that beings are suffering. You are spontaneously helping them. So 38, it says, you know, how's that possible? You know, how's that possible? And furthermore, you know, if you say Buddhas have gone beyond, then how can making offerings to their relics produce any effect? So
So we are supposed to think that there was someone or some people who raised this as a serious question for Shantideva, kind of challenging Shantideva. What's the point of making offerings like to Buddha statues, making offerings to Buddha relics? They're inanimate, you know. Now, all I can say is Shantideva can only resort to the sutras say so. It can bring benefit. Don't worry about it. That's basically, you know, it seems to be his answer to the 38 and 39. It says merit, so the scriptures say, arises regardless. Yes, so maybe, you know, if we study more and we read more and, you know, contemplate on this more, maybe at some point in the future, the argument in these two verses will become clearer. Right now, yeah, it's like, okay, you know, I don't know what to say beyond that. I've looked at the available commentaries, and they're also kind of like, we don't really know, you know, who are the people raising this objection and what is he really talking about? Now, starting from stanza 40, now we know better who Shantideva is talking about. And so it's like a new set of objections being raised, and Shantideva responding to those objections. The section, the objection, is with regards to those who do not accept the Mahayana tradition that Shantideva is a part of. So here, often in the traditional commentary, it says, this is refuting the objections raised by those who follow the Shravaka or the hearer traditions. Now, then here, what is really helpful, I think, is in Kempo Kunpel's commentary. He says, he says, now when we use this expression, the Shravakas, or the followers of the Shravaka tradition, he says, depending on context, they're talking about potentially 4 different groups, 4 different types of people that they're talking about. Whenever you encounter the word Shravaka, that there are 4 different types of people that we're talking about. So I think this is helpful because then we will not misunderstand, what is being critiqued, what is being criticized, and then we don't misapply, the criticism or the refutation. Here, the 4 types of Shravaka, according to Kempo Kunpel, it says, first, there are those Shravakas who are emanations of basically Buddhas and great Bodhisattvas. They take on the appearance of Shravakas, meaning the immediate disciples of the historical Buddha. That's the first type of Shravaka. The second kind of Shravaka, according to him, are those who, for now, they are headed towards the limited result of personal liberation, personal individual liberation, but at a further point into the future, they will actually achieve the perfect state of a complete Buddha. These are the second type of Shravakas. Basically, you could say, with these 2 types of Shravakas, no problem. Shantideva has no problem with them, because the Mahayana view that the only truly meaningful goal to achieve is the goal, is the state of a perfect and complete Buddha. That these first two groups clearly they are going there, or they have come from there, so to say, right? If they are emanations, they have come from that state. And then if they're not emanations, but they are only temporarily, going towards personal liberation, but at some point will go beyond personal into universal liberation, so to say. These two groups of Shravakas, no problem. So the Buddha's immediate disciples, the Buddha's immediate disciples, kind of like Ananda, Shariputra, Akashapa, all these historical Buddhas disciples, they are considered, part of these two groups. Either they are emanation of Buddhas or great Bodhisattvas, appearing to help Buddha Shakyamuni in his effort to liberate beings, or they are, guided by the Buddha to first go towards personal liberation, and then when they have enough confidence to move on to the greater liberation. The third and the fourth. The third are those who are only headed for their own personal liberation. And in fact, they say, no, there's no need to think about others. That's the third group. That's the third case where the term Shravaka might be used. And the fourth scenario where the term Shravaka might be used, Khenpo Kumpel gives them a name, Sandava. And who are these Sandavas? These Sandavas are, he says, those who have much intellectual pride. So this is referring to the other groups of Buddhists during the time of Shantideva who object to the Mahayana, and they hold very strongly to their own schools, their own traditions, views. And these are the ones who say, all these Mahayana teachings are fake, they are false. So obviously, this section of refuting the Shravaka is not refuting the first two groups, but it's refuting the third and the fourth group. Yes, so now stanza 40, Shantideva presents an objection from group 3 and 4, right, of these four possible groups. So he says, we are free, you say, through seeing the truths, the Four Noble Truths. This is stanza 40. What use is it to us, this view of emptiness that you are teaching? You Mahayana people talk about so much. So it's basically, it's saying, those from 3 and 4 says, it's sufficient to understand the Four Noble Truths. No need. Your emptiness business, we don't need that. Shantideva's response to that objection is, he says, the sutras, the scriptures, they all say, realizing emptiness is necessary. Then, of course, it's not explicitly stated here, right? But basically, right, in stanza 41, basically, the response to Shantideva is scriptures. What scriptures? You mean your Mahayana scriptures? We do not accept your Mahayana scriptures. Our scriptures never talk about you have to realize emptiness. So in 41, Shantideva says, you say the Mahayana has no certainty, meaning these Mahayana texts, there's no certainty. Then Shantideva kind of responds to that by saying, well, then how do you substantiate your tradition? If you say my Mahayana scriptures cannot be substantiated, then how do you substantiate what you accept to be true? The sutras that you accept to be true. So the answer of the opponents is, well, you also accept those scriptures. Both you and I accept those scriptures. Then Shantideva's answer is like, you have not really answered my question. All you have said is, since both you and I accept, so we all have to accept. He says, but you have not answered my question. Independent of us accepting these scriptures that you accept, if independent of that, how are you substantiating your scriptures. In other words, Shantideva, is basically saying to them, your answer is going to be, well, we traditionally accept that these are the words of the Buddha. Then he said, in 42, he says, likewise, we traditionally accept these Mahayana sutras to be the words of the Buddha. So if your reasoning is shaky, no, if my reasoning is shaky, your reasoning is just as shaky. If you think your reasoning is strong, then my reasoning is based on that same reasoning, and therefore my reasoning is also strong. This is now Shantideva using debate, right? Using clever talk, basically, right? In a way, it's like, it's not very convincing. But Shantideva is like, basically Shantideva is saying, you want to talk logic? Let's go down that road and see how far we both can get. Yeah, in a way, this kind of argument, you see it as used today by some, scholars or monks from the non-Mahayana traditions. They will say, oh, these Mahayana scriptures, they are not real. And so then they will quote, right, from the Theravada Pali scriptures. They'll quote from there. And then they will treat the Pali sutras as if, right, that undoubtedly those are the words of the Buddha. But fully, you cannot, if you want to apply to say the same burden of truth, right, it's also just as shaky. Scholars who have looked into the Pali Canon also said, well, this was put together hundreds of years later. You can also raise a big doubt, a big question mark, How do we know? Buddha Shakyamuni actually spoke these words. So in a way, Shantideva is saying, on one level, we accept what we accept based on faith. So if you don't like that answer, then you say, we have to accept what we accept based on reasoning. And really, that's what he's doing in this chapter. He says, let's come back to reasoning. Let's not get into the, well, my scriptures are more real than your scriptures. Because if you're going to use that criteria, he says, in verse line 3 and 4 of stanza 42, he says, if you accept something to be true just because a lot of people trust it, then in the case of India, we Buddhists are a minority, them Hindus are a majority, many Hindus believe in the Vedas, then what? Now we're going to accept that the Vedas is also true? And then 43, Shantideva goes further, a little bit more. He's going to point out these types of debates. He says, then you may say, but is what's been, not the earlier stuff. It's the Mahayana stuff that people have doubts about. So on that basis itself, you all should not rely on these Mahayana texts, right? Then Shantideva said, you know what? These Buddhist, the sutras that both you and I accept, many other people in India don't accept. They also call those things into question. So if on the basis of there are people calling certain things into question, and that kind of is what you use to disqualify certain texts, then all our Buddhist texts will be disqualified, because there are lots of Hindus who say, no. These things, are unreliable. So then you have to abandon also your scriptures. Yeah, so now let's take a quick break before we continue to the next section.
Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware 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 Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware.
Okay, so now let's go to the next section. So basically, this last section that we just covered, it reflects some of the arguments and counter arguments that was going on during Shantideva's time. So you can tell from this that different groups of Buddhists during Shantideva's time, some identify with the Mahayana teachings and also accept the earlier teachings, but saw the Mahayana teachings as further kind of illuminating the earlier teachings. Then there were some who exclusively only stay focus on and in fact only accept the earlier teachings. Now the earlier teachings, as a matter of fact today, right, it's not only in the Pali, it's not just preserved in the Pali texts. In the Chinese Buddhist canon, in the Tibetan Buddhist canon, these earlier teachings are also found recorded in them. And also in the Pali texts, it's not like all the Pali texts were, they are all earlier. Again, there is a development of those texts over centuries and centuries. So some of them belong to the very early layer, some belong to much later layer. Just for our understanding, I should mention that. Wei Ting, I cannot hear anything. You're muted. So this last set of arguments in the last 4 or 5 stanzas, on one level you could say that sounds kind of petty. That he's just engaging in some petty debate. But it doesn't have to be like this. I think we can still take something from this by saying, a lot of times, we apply a particular logic to discredit some other person's position. And we're not even aware that that same kind of reasoning can be used to undermine what we hold to be very dear and very precious. So Shantideva in some ways is showing us that. If you want to discredit someone's holy books, be careful that the reasoning that you use is not also easily used to discredit what you hold to be holy, you hold to be special. And oftentimes it can be applied so that it cuts both ways. The next 4 or 5 stanzas seems to be a type of argument centered around claims of I'm so advanced, I am so holy, I am so perfect, and therefore what I believe must be true. Now, in this section, I think Shantideva would say, yes, of course. If really, right, you have uprooted the poisons, the 3 poisons, and then more importantly, you have uprooted all clinging. Yes, then whatever you believe to be true with regards to what the Buddha taught, those surely, if they have helped you to get rid of the 3 poisons, and then more specifically, get rid of clinging onto self, then yes, of course, that is a good proof that what you believe and what you practice is valid. However, he says, often we think, oh, I'm doing really well. I'm very advanced. But in fact, you are still entangled. You are still trapped. So 44, it says, the true monk is the root of dharma. And to be a monk, to be a true monk, is difficult indeed. It is hard for minds enmeshed in thoughts, minds that are still, completely wrapped up in thoughts and ideas and theories. And it is very difficult for minds enmeshed in thoughts to pass beyond the bonds of suffering. This is stanza 44. And then here, Kempo he says, and as for this word, monks, he says, generally, 5 types of individuals, 5 types of people, that people rightfully or wrongfully refer to them as monks. So again, just like with regards to the term Shravaka, he says they're used to designate 4 different groups. Here he says, when people say monk, in the Buddhist context, and maybe more specifically in the Tibetan context, when people say monks, they can be referring to 5 types of people. Of course, in the 5, he will say, most of these are not what we're talking about here. He says the first group are those who are they're just called monks. He says they're just called monks. So this probably refers to, and this is the case in Tibet, there are men, usually boys, that are sent by their parents to the monastery. And in order to live in the monastery, to be part of the monastery, right, you shave your head, you put on the robes, right? But you have not really exactly gone through all the proper ordination rituals and all of that. But you shave your head, you live, in the monastery, you wear those robes, you eat and you live, there. But you're not really a monk yet. So that's the first group. Of course, many of these young boys, later on go on to take proper ordination, take proper vows and all of that. But there are some who never do that, they live their whole lives as a monk, but they're not. Second group, he says, there are those who have taken the vows, gone through the ritual, all of that, dressed like one, live among, live in the monastery, but their vows have degenerated, and they have not confessed to the breaking of those vows and restored the vows. So these are those who have been, their vows have been harmed. Second group, he says. And then the third group, he says, are those who, they are called monks simply because they receive offerings. They receive offerings of the lay people, but we have absolutely no idea, do they keep vows? Have they taken the vows? Do they live in a monastery? No idea. So these might be those individuals that are, hanging around at holy sites, like in the Bodha Stupa area, in Bodh in Varan, in Deer Park, in Shravasti, you have people who are there, they're just receiving offerings, When the day ends, who knows? They go home to their wife. Nobody knows, So, but they are receiving offerings by presenting themselves as part of Buddha's order of monks. Those are the third group. The fourth one are those who have properly received the vows and have maintained their vows. And the fifth one are those who have abandoned the kleshas, the afflictive emotions. So there is one etymology of the word bhikshu. So this is basically saying bhikshu. Bhikshu is what we translate as monks. Sanskrit word bhikshus, not big shoe. Okay, I remember I was talking about big shoes. This is finally somebody said, "What is this deal with like having big shoes?" It's like, no, it's a Sanskrit word, bhikshu. Okay, so there is one etymology of bhikshu that associate it with those who kill, those who like kill or destroy the enemies. So that is this meaning. Those who have abandoned, those who have overcome the afflictive emotions. So of these five, Khenpo Kumpel says, the last two are what we're talking about here when we say the true monk is the root of Dharma. On the relative level, those monks and nuns really who have taken the vows, maintaining the vows, on the relative level, they are the root of Dharma. Then on the inner level or the ultimate level, the ones who have destroyed, who have abandoned the afflictive emotions, they are the true monk that are the root of the Dharma, the basis of the Dharma are such individuals. So this in this section, you can imagine some of those who don't accept the Mahayana want to make the argument that among us, we are very virtuous monks, So this is the proof, that we got the correct Dharma. Shantideva says, yes, yes, yes. I agree that those who are able to abandon the afflictive emotions, they truly are the root of Dharma. However, that is not so easy. In fact, as long as your attention, your focus, your mind is still caught up in thoughts, and specifically in thoughts here is referring to thoughts of clinging, then it is not possible to be free from the bonds of suffering.
Sorry, Dr. Lai, can you repeat again this section?
Can you tell me what you have heard?
Mahayana virtuous monks.
That's all you heard?
I heard the last part. As long as your mind still caught up in thoughts of clinging.
Okay, so the front part, the gist of it is this. There are those who don't accept the Mahayana that will now make the argument. So the argument about we have the true scriptures, he has dismissed. That's not enough to say you are right, I'm wrong, right? So now it seems like what they're saying is, but we have very virtuous monks. By implication, you guys are not very virtuous. So then Shantideva says, yes, of course, the root of Dharma is virtuous monks. But just looking virtuous, is not yet. Because more basic than looking virtuous is there grasping or not still? If there is still grasping, so this enmeshed with thoughts in the translation I have for line 3 of stanza 44, as long as the mind is still clinging to something, then it's not yet free. from the bonds of suffering. Then 45, Shantideva says, you say there is liberation the instant that the defilements are entirely forsaken. Yet those who from defilements are set free continue to display the influence of karma. So here what he's talking about is those who don't accept the Mahayana during his time, during Shantideva's time, they say that Shravakas are freed once and for all from all confusion and suffering the moment they break their defilements. So Shantideva says, but even after they have supposedly broken their defilements, you can see how karma is still continuing to influence the way they act. And so in the commentaries, there are some examples given. And there's stories of like Shravaka disciples who have achieved the fruit of Arhat, still having these habits controlling their lives. Like one story of this Arhat who, despite having achieved the highest level of the Shravaka path, he continues to habitually refer to someone as, hey, little slave. He calls this one river spirit, hey, little slave, like a very condescending term. It's because for many lifetimes that river spirit was indeed the slave of this person. But even after he achieved the highest of the Shravaka path, this habit is still there. So this is what Shantideva is talking about. And he says, as long as that is still there, how can such a person be the root of the Dharma? Not so easy, he says. Yes, so 46 further, Shantideva says, he says, yes, I know. You will say, oh, no, no, no. Whatever negative habits or signs that are still continuing to turn up, right, in this person, it's merely the remainder stuff. No new negative is coming anymore. Once the remainder stuff is completely exhausted, then these people will be completely free already. That's the gist of what 46 is saying. But then, the first part of 46. Second part of 46, Shantideva, if I understand these this last two lines right, Shantideva says, he says, you say, right, that they have ended their craving, and therefore whatever is still showing up that is negative is simply the leftover stuff that needs to play out its course. But basically, Shantideva says, as long as that is still going on, how can that not be a type of defilement? That is also a type of defilement. Now, I have to basically admit, like it's hard to understand the exact kind of like power of Shantideva's argument in this section. But the main point is this, is the third and the fourth line of verse 47, which is concepts linger still within their minds, and it is to these concepts that they cling. Line 3 and 4 of 47. Which then brings him to the main point that he wants to make on 48, which is the mind that has not realized voidness, that have not realized emptiness, then whatever defilements that seem to have disappeared is only temporarily halted. But when the conditions are right, when the conditions turn up again, then the concepts will turn up. And then with the concepts turning up, then the defilements will turn up because clinging to concepts will occur. And he says, and therefore, this training in emptiness that we are talking about here is absolutely necessary, because that is the only cure to getting rid of clinging once and for all. So the main point is really leading up what these, even though I'm not able to help you really get the sense, the force of this argument he's making in 46 and 47. But what he wants to lead us to is an understanding that he expresses in 48, which is the mind that has not realized emptiness, although it may be halted. And here the mind means, or what may be halted, may be stopped, is talking about the defilements. So even if the defilements can be stopped, right? But when conditions are ripe, these defilements will come back up again. The only solution is to really train in seeing emptiness. Then any and all basis of clinging will be destroyed. So it seems, as far as I understand it, is he's saying, those of you who don't accept the Mahayana, and here when he says accept Mahayana, primarily he's talking about accept this teaching on emptiness. He says, if you just say focus on removing the defilements, meaning the gross aspects of suffering, of the causes of suffering, if you don't go right to the absolute cause of suffering, which is clinging, if you don't go right to that, then whatever result you think you have achieved, they are only temporary. 48. Yes, so today we're going to stop here. Looking forward, okay, 49, 50, 51, 49, 50, 51. Again, Shantideva goes back to wanting to defend the Mahayana. You can almost feel like, in Nalanda at that time, there's still very much people questioning the legitimacy of Mahayana. And again here, the main thing what Mahayana represents is those who teach the importance of understanding thoroughly and completely this point about emptiness, which is the topic of the wisdom of this, the wisdom that is the title of this chapter 9.
Sorry, I didn't. Sorry, Doctor, I didn't get the last sentence.
Basically, when we say Mahayana, we're talking about this emphasis on needing to understand the centrality of realizing emptiness. Yeah. We're not talking so much about, oh, Pure Land, many Buddhas, Amitabha, blah, 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 all the other things that people normally think of as Mahayana, right? Here, the prime concern is this teaching on emptiness. And here and there throughout this chapter, we get this sense that Shantideva is saying that many of those who don't accept, many of those Buddhists who don't accept this teaching of emptiness is mainly because they misunderstand what this emptiness is about. They think we're talking about nothing exists. Nothing exists whatsoever. And so he says, then they think that we are advocating, we Mahayana teachings on emptiness are advocating nihilism. He says, no, we're not talking about nihilism. So those who don't accept the teachings of emptiness, they will say, it is sufficient to simply, it is sufficient to just realize the lack of personal self. That once that is realized, that's it, enough. The Mahayana teachings on emptiness says that is not final. The final has to be not only seeing that the personal self doesn't exist, but even impersonal self also don't exist. So this is called emptiness of phenomena. Not only do we need to understand emptiness or the lack of self of persons, we also need to understand and completely realize the lack of self, the lack of substantiality of phenomena, meaning impersonal phenomena. Personal phenomena, meaning whatever we tend to think, oh, this is I, this is mine, this is me, I'm like this, like that, right? So that's the personal self. But Mahayana teachings on emptiness will say that is simply the gross level of clinging. There is still a more basic level of clinging that needs to be undermined, that needs to be destroyed. And that can only be destroyed through the teachings on emptiness. So if we get out of this more historical context of like, potentially kind of sectarian debate, sectarian disagreement about this and that, if we step out of that context and see this more as showing us that there are grosser level of attachment and clinging, which is easier to undermine, but underneath those are often a more kind of imprecise but more stubborn level of clinging that is going to be still there, that we have to go deeper to that level to also clean that level out. So anyway, we'll end here tonight. Also, good news for not just you, for me. We are almost out of the woods in terms of you say this, I say this, I say this, you say this, until like, wait, who said what? We're almost done with that. Now we're going more into, like without debate anymore, but Shantideva taking us deeper into the meaning of emptiness. And also this section on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, of the body, of the sensations or feelings, of mind, and of dharma. So we are almost done with the you say this, I said that, I said that, you said this, you said this, you said that, I said this, I said that. Wait, who said what? We're almost done with that section. Here and there, he still does 1 or 2 lines like this, but for the most part. So a big section of what follows is the 4 foundations of mindfulness from the perspective of the emptiness teachings. Changju Sen Choren Poche Ma Kye Pa Kye Lu Che Kye Pa Nyam Pa Me Pa Women go sure. Ta-ta, everybody. Thank you so much.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you,
Thank you, Dr.
Lai.
Lai.
Thank you,
Gracias, Dr. Lai.